Well, singing Psalm 24 reminded me of I shouldn't laugh, it's not laughable. It reminds me of my lawless days in high school. Remember the wooden floor as well? We had a slanted wooden floor. And it was a mixture of, certainly rebellion, being a naughty teenager, but then also being struck by the weight of the words of Psalm 24. We sung, or maybe you did as well, when you were in high school, primary school. It's probably for us older generations, but we sung hymns and psalms. We had a sermon every morning at a public school just down the road. And I was impressed by what I was singing, but I was also very much holding on to the pleasures of my lawlessness. And at the same time, I would end up every Sunday wanting to please my mom. My dad was not a professing Christian at the time, but I would go to church. But I would go, and I had a very disturbed conscience because of what I would do the night before and how I knew I was disrespecting my parents. But the hound of heaven didn't let go of me, just kept pursuing me and prodding me. And I think most of you know in my second year of college, they're probably one of the most hedonistic colleges on the planet. I came to faith. And then I met Adina. She's not here at the moment. I think she's with the kiddos. We joke, probably shouldn't joke about it, but we do. She grew up on Stardust Street, overlooking the casinos, also a cesspool. She grew up the daughter of a minister, and who would have thought I would meet Dina at the University of Nevada in Reno, overlooking the casinos. But God has his ways, and God is addressing through Titus, through this letter to Titus, the believers in Crete, in many respects not unlike Corinth, or unlike Athens, or like Rome. It's just a really lawless place. And I just want you to, and maybe it is necessary to encourage you not to almost be perhaps despondent because you don't have this radical conversion. You don't have this sort of bad, lawless past and then you became a Christian. I think you should be grateful if you don't have that. Because even though we're redeemed from our sins, there's still consequences for our actions. And sometimes those consequences can reverberate into adulthood and beyond. So not beyond this life, but this is certainly not, Paul is not saying here that despite our redemption, our being purified as a people for God's own possession, that does not mean there are not civil or psychological consequences to our conduct in the past or going into the future. But what most certainly is true, and this is the foundation for the message on church discipline again in the next couple of minutes, and that is, there is no consequence before God, no matter how brazen and high-handed your sin has been or will be. You can be a felon. I remember being in churches in the past. There were convicted criminals sitting next to me, murderer, rapist, and they're sitting there. They've done their hard time. And they're just as welcome in the presence of God in worship as me. And I, with all my lawlessness in the past. So nothing can change your justification. Nothing can overturn God's judgments. And so that is so important when we consider discipline, because there may be a time for official discipline through the church of you or me. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But certainly Hebrews chapter 11 teaches, Hebrews chapter 12 teaches, that as a loving parent, just like a loving parent that disciplines their children, God does discipline us at times, and sometimes sharply. I remember Luther once writing that it kind of likens God's discipline to, and this is classic Luther, it's like taking, when you, and we don't have to do this fortunately today because we have better technology, but in his day, you actually had to sometimes use sand along with soap, with a wet rag to clean a dirty child. It's painful. Sometimes there was blood involved, just because it's just the nature of what they had at their disposal. It wasn't to harm the child, but to clean the child. And likewise, sometimes there's a sting to God's discipline. But it's always toward restoration. And so, my message for you is simple, and that is that God uses the means of church discipline, the means of the pastor, the elders. He uses each other to admonish, to hold accountable, but he uses the authority, the official authority of the church at times to exhort and rebuke. And that can, when there's obstinacy, when there are those who are entrenched in their sins, excommunication can happen.